Hey guys, welcome to Crypto with Pav, where I'll give you my honest take on what I'm seeing in the markets right now, and hopefully call out what I think is the next big thing to be watching. So it's a pretty important episode. I think it's one of the most pivotal ones we've seen in a while, only because we've obviously experienced quite a few months of Bitcoin going up only. We've had the big ETF news, and all of a sudden there's lots of red candles, and everyone's a bit confused. So we'll dive into this as much as we can. Look at a lot of data for Q1, especially in halving years. So there's been a pretty interesting pattern that we'll dive into first. But then it's all about setting up what's to come potentially at the back end of this year. Q2 seems to be one of really important, so we'll dive into that too. But I'm of the personal opinion that we won't go too much higher in Q1. But there's still room for upside. I mean, the one thing I'm setting aside as a thesis right now is there's still the opportunity for a massive altcoin swing, and that's my key message here today. Just to break down with you guys, like why I still think altcoins could still see some love in the coming weeks. Leading into the January, February months, and a lot of that definitely just comes down to seasonality. And I still think Bitcoin itself probably could go lower between now and the end of the quarter. But yeah, we'll dive into the details, I guess, very shortly. We've got some great examples of, in the past, what's played out when we've had similar price action that we have right now. It's very interesting. We've got some pretty key support ranges, but I think the easiest way is to just jump in and show everyone instead of trying to continuously poorly describe it. So we'll jump in right now. So this is a chart I've shown on previous videos and shared across my socials on X. You can follow me on Twitter if you haven't already. But we've talked about previous cycles have shown some sort of correction, reversion to mean, whatever you want to call it, when prior monthly levels have been hit leading up to the halvings. So key call out really just on this one is this little guy here. So this is a chart from CoinGlass, a little website that has some great information, great stats on it. The boxed figures here are the halving years as we have here. We can see Q1 historically has never been that crash hot for crypto. Specifically Bitcoin here is the figures that we're presenting. So -3% in 2016, -10% in 2020, and we're already at -5% for 2024. We're putting in new yearly lows as we speak. So we're basically on track. But yeah, I'm of the opinion that we're not going to just go sideways from here. Markets are volatile. We've seen the Bitcoin specifically being pretty quiet for some time now. It's only really just starting to unleash. So the same way we've seen, that move to the upside recently, you've got to expect some sort of recoil to the downside. And if it even doesn't go down that far, it's going to recoil back to the upside as well. So volatility, I believe, has come back enough to sort of at least leave some more, short-term movements in the market rather than just going stagnant again for a couple of months. I just don't see that playing out, to be honest. But another way to visualize this as well is this graph here from CryptoQuant. This also looks at, from the start of the calendar year in a halving year, what has been the cumulative returns. And what's apparent here is we have seen choppiness, we have seen up, we have seen down, especially in that first 2 months of the year, until that third month kicks in and the Q1 ends, where we do start to see price really settle down, start to get that grinding accumulation behavior leading into Q2, Q3, Q4. So this little squiggle here is also where we are right now. So we're pretty much on track to put in a pretty yucky quarter for most people that have just potentially just got back in or just starting for the first time in crypto. But what I want to point out here is, looking again at these quarterly returns, Q2 has been a great performer in halving years. So 2020, 42% respectively, 2016, 62%. So just thinking about that too from a fundamental perspective, you don't just go into these quarters and just put in big green candles. It does take selling, price stabilizing, people starting to slowly accumulate before you then start to move up to the upside as well. So that alone, I'm anticipating that in the back end of Q1 is when we might start to see, a lot of that sort of settling, some accumulation to play out, which means we probably have very little time for upside, more time for downside leading into February. we're still pretty early. I guess we're at the back end of January now, but there is potentially one scenario that I want to point out today, which is probably the last hurrah for altcoins, for the bulls, for the next few weeks. So we're going to know pretty quickly if this thesis does or doesn't play out, but I want to walk everyone through, I guess, just my mindset into why I still think we are likely to follow this sort of pattern, and what it would take for us to actually hit this outcome versus not hit it, and what that looks like. So everyone's hopefully going to know what to do, and have a plan for themselves and their own investing or trading strategies moving forward. And if it's not that, maybe you just like to enjoy watching the markets, and this adds a bit of fun for you. Nothing wrong with that as well. So this guy here is the CME Group, Chicago Mercantile Exchange, TradFi outfit. They have a tool called the FedWatch tool. So US interest rates really do govern a lot of what happens in the crypto markets. As you're all probably aware, most cryptos are valued in US dollars. But overall, it sort of sets a cadence for, I guess, just confidence. At what point do people move from safe havens like savings into risk-on assets? It would take basically interest rate drops. But it was also the interest rates dropping would obviously also just improve consumer sentiment towards risk-on assets like stocks, like crypto, et cetera, et cetera. So really, when you think of it that way, if we're waiting for interest rates to drop before we're expecting people to get interested to come back to crypto in a meaningful enough way to give a sustained rally, so far the probabilities are sitting at I guess May as our most likely period for when we might see some ease coming. Currently, the probabilities, according to the FedWatch tool, is a 2% to 3% chance in the end of January, and a 43.5% chance for the end of March. So this one does move over time. So it's something that I do pay attention to, and I will sort of keep everyone up to date on. But, if we're looking at things from a top-down perspective, it does sort of indicate that, the real relief in a meaningful way is still yet to come later on this year. So that's why I still think Q1 could be overall a down quarter. Now, if we look into, I guess, where price currently is, we had this support range that we had been watching since last week, since we tagged the March 2022 high. So this was our point of interest. This is where we were talking about in my first video, actually, where I would be interested to see if we could crack through, or if we were going to simply hit into it and then fall back away. So we seem to have, unfortunately, done the latter. And the weekend trading, we really saw a flat move after we broke under this level as well. So we've really failed to hold this in a meaningful way. But that doesn't mean it's over for the bulls. And this is, I guess, the main part of the thesis that I'm putting forward. We do have these previous highs down here, which is also a monthly sort of cluster as well, when you look at a monthly chart. Even if we are sort of bearish for the next few months, usually you do start to see, even technically speaking, a move higher to, I guess, retest a key level that's been broken at least once, before you subsequently move lower as well and start to mark down further. So, if we are bearish long term, let's say for the rest of this quarter, there's still a chance to, at least in the next few weeks, move up higher for a little bit before we start to head lower, as we're sort of anticipating for the quarter. So it's this up move that could be coming, which could grind away for a few weeks if we're, I guess, if we're lucky as a part of this idea, that really sets up the groundwork for what's needed to precipitate an altcoin rally. So while this might look a bit busy, the best way to really describe this is going to be with previous examples. So I've gone through and found 2 examples of where we've seen pretty similar action in the past, and I've got it here for you now. So this is back in 2019, 2020, the 2020 halving being just there, where we had a series of, I guess, a key resistance area being broken and a rally starting just a few months out from the halving, which then failed to continue. So a little bit of a different scenario here versus where we are now. If we think about that March 22 high, in the 2019 phase in the market cycle, we kind of hit a similar level way back here in June. So we got there a lot faster. And once the price hit that level, it just went sideways and down. But this phase here was a sign of the market trying to rally and failing. So I guess a bit of a failure there. But If we line that up against total 3, which is essentially tracking the total market cap of all crypto assets, minus Bitcoin, minus Ethereum. This is that same period of time. So, I mean, this was largely inactive, even after Bitcoin ran all the way up to 14K. But it was during that particular breakout, which was a failed breakout, that the altcoin rally probably had one of its biggest legs up before starting at the full run. So in this period alone, it went up 100%. So I still think that's not 100% something that could transpose into where we are now. Like 100% move across the altcoin market is probably unlikely. But it just goes to show that even though we had a failure for Bitcoin to move higher, rejecting pretty convincingly at this sort of support resistance area, there was still an opportunity for altcoins to have a pretty dynamic uplift in price before capitulating and wiping out their entire gains. So that's the other part of this equation as well. So if Bitcoin were to basically go back to where it started for the month after some kind of rally, you would potentially expect a lot of those altcoin gains to be lost as well. So, me personally, as part of my strategy, any sort of speculation that I'm doing to the long side of alts, I'm being sort of cautionary with that sort of caveat as well in mind. The other example, which probably is a bit more similar to what we're seeing right now in price, is this guy here. So this was the top, or the second peak that we put in at the top of the 2021 bull market. So we had a pretty similar structure where we had key low support ranges break. We had that initial sell down, but we had a relief rally, which is, I guess, the important part, but we failed to follow through. So in that same instance, this was the altcoin market during that period. So this is probably, I guess, a little bit different to the last example. It looks a lot more similar in structure, but the time and the cycle is a little bit different. This is more during the bull market itself. But you can see during that phase, while Bitcoin was not moving too far, it moved about 18% odd. The altcoin market cap was on a rampage, moving 50, 60%, depending on how you'd like to measure that top to bottom. So that's kind of my thought process here. Like, we have this previous support range. If we do or don't come into contact with it, we'll wait and see. But it's this next reaction. If we do come up, if we could grind and move higher, that would be setting up an opportunity for the altcoin market to do a pretty similar move. And, if we look at where it is today, it's over here. This is a bit of a roadmap that we've been following for the last little while. If we were, this is what I think we're going to find out pretty soon too, because these are pretty key levels on here that are about to be lost as well if we don't get this bounce. This could be what potentially sets it for the next leg up higher to this key range here. So about a 50% move from current valuations if we were to see it. If we don't see it, you'd probably consider a move down here would be likely, and that's another scenario that we'd break down next time. But that's what I'm interested in seeing right now. And, the alternate scenarios of like, if this weren't to play out would be these sort of red lines. You could start to see price roll over as soon as we hit that. That would be a failure of this setup as well in this thesis. If we see a complete constant sell, just price plunging through these levels, also would be an invalidation. We might look to reevaluate this whole situation. But yeah, the next few days will be very, very interesting. And while we've talked through what it would take for this to play out, what it would take for it to fail, what would it be our expectations, specifically around the altcoin markets. In terms of when it would happen, I mean, not really sure, right? But this was a little post I put up today regarding some macroeconomic news releases. So, like we talked about, US dollar definitely sets a tone for how crypto moves, and anything that removes uncertainty generally helps drive the next direction or bias for the markets from what I've found. So, Thursday, Friday, we have some pretty big key news releases. You don't need to know necessarily what these are, but we have PMI reports from the US. So producer PMI, producer manager indexes, product. Oh my God, I just wrote about this today. Have I forgotten already? It is the Purchasing Managers Index. There you go. Finally got it. Bit too late in the evening for me. So Purchasing Managers Indexes, they're general surveys. which probably are the most leading indicator for health in the economy at this stage, because it is the general troops on the ground that probably have the best sort of tell on how the current market is shaping up for them specifically. So we've got that one to come out. It's a pretty big one just for sentiment in the market, I would say. Then later that evening, we have GDP, so the just gross domestic product for the US. It's quarter-on-quarter data, and what's interesting here is the previous quarterly figure was 4.9%, and what's been forecasted is 2% by the Bureau. So pretty big gap. And again, we talk about anything unexpected driving volatility in the markets. So anything unexpected outside of this forecasted figure might drive some volatility, and that might be what potentially gives us, I guess, our draw and our answer on where the markets could be going, and if this, this might be enough for price to snap and choose a direction. We also have core PCE data coming out, so personal consumption expenditures. So that's more to do with inflation. That's a lead indicator for the US Fed when setting interest rates. So that'll be a pretty important one too. So, we tick all those items off. The next week, we'd be going into the Fed meetings, knowing a little bit more about how the market's shaping up, how the market's perceiving what's been priced in, and we'll see where we go from there. But I mean, once we get to the back end of this data from the week, we might see some sort of trend direction play out. And we'll sort of know if we're going to go higher here, really see if this thesis could play out, or if we're just going to break through, continue to sell down, and, we just reassess and come see what the market's offering next week as well. But, for me, the setup here for a potential rally in altcoin markets is definitely not off the cards. So that's what I'll be looking to see, as we were already sort of suspecting there was a down move here coming last week. So that's it from me today, guys. Hopefully that was easy enough to follow along with. Let me know if it was too complicated in the comments, or, obviously if you liked it, give it a like, give it a share. Any sort of support is very much appreciated. But we'll catch you guys very soon for an update on how this all plays out. Thanks very much.